In this video, we'll be going over Worksheet 1-1, Taxable Scholarship and Fellowship Grant Income, which you can find in IRS Publication 970, Tax Benefits for Education. So this past tax season, or this tax season, lots of people have written in asking about scholarship income and when it could be taxed. And the IRS actually does a pretty good job of putting together worksheets to help you figure that out. So we're going to walk through this worksheet just using a fictional example. I'll take a moment out to explain some of these sections specifically that are highlighted in blue. If you're actually in the publication, which you can find on the IRS website, these are hyperlinks. You could simply use that to go to that section. So let's go ahead and start with the top of the worksheet. In line 1, you'll enter the total amount of any scholarship or fellowship grant for the tax year. So it immediately says, see amount of scholarship or fellowship grant earlier. So in an earlier reference, this actually refers to the amount of a scholarship or a fellowship grant to include 1, the value of contributed services and accommodations, such as room and board, laundry services, other similar services or accommodations that you would receive as part of a scholarship or a fellowship grant. 2, the amount of tuition, matriculation, and other fees that are paid for or given to you as a student to help you in your pursuit of study or research. And 3, any amount that was received in the nature of a family allowance as part of your grant. So general basic tax principles apply in this case. If, for example, you received $50,000 as a scholarship for a given tax year, and they actually just gave you a check, but you only had $20,000 of qualified education expenses, guess what? You're going to have to report that on a tax return somehow. So this worksheet, when we get to the bottom, will help you understand whether or not there's a taxable component to this fellowship or scholarship grant that we just talked about. So right off the bat, if you are not a degree candidate at an eligible education institution, then 100% of this amount is taxable. So you don't even need to go further. However, most people that are going through this worksheet are probably a degree candidate. They're probably at an eligible education institution. So we'll move on to line 2. So of that amount, you need to enter any amount that was for teaching, research, or other services that were required as part of your condition for receiving a scholarship. So the IRS considers anything that you do in exchange for work to be work-related income. And so basically this, whatever you enter here into line 2, is going to be part of the calculation of what would be considered the taxable part of your scholarship. So for example, if they gave you a $20,000 scholarship, but then they told you that you had to earn, a certain portion of it, and they gave you an hourly rate based on teaching or whatever, then that actually is not a scholarship. That's considered taxable income. And then they're going to ask you to report that. However, you would not include amounts received for certain programs. The National Health Service Corps Scholarship, the Armed Forces Health Professions Scholarship and Financial Assistance Program, or a comprehensive student work learning service program that's operated by a work college. So those programs are exempt from this requirement, but in this case, our fictional hero is reporting $10,000 of that scholarship that was for teaching, research, and other services. So in line 3, we're going to subtract that. Now, $10,000 is remaining This part is already going to come down into this taxable portion. But what we probably need to do is figure out some other components that might make part or the rest of your grant taxable. So in line 4, you're going to enter the amount from line 3 that required you to use your grant for something other than qualified education expenses. So in this case, we say $5,000 was required for costs that don't meet the criteria. So we subtract line 4 from line 3, and we arrive at $5,000. So the line 4 amount, as you can see down here, also helps to constitute the taxable part. So now we've got $5,000 remaining. Let's see what, if anything, of this would be considered taxable income. So in line 6, we're going to enter the amount of actual qualified education expenses. And then in line 7, we'll enter the smaller of line 5 or line 6, which happens to be the remaining component, the $5,000. Now we're going to subtract that from line 5. We're going to arrive at 0, which means that this remaining $5,000 is fully covered by the amount of qualified education expenses, and then that would be considered non-taxable. So we add lines 2, which is $10,000, 4, which is $5,000, and 8, which is 0, and we arrive at $15,000. Now, if you're a college student, this doesn't necessarily mean that you need to pay taxes on this. So what the publication says is that whether you report your scholarship or fellowship grant depends on whether you must file a return and whether or not any part of your grant is taxable. So if your only income is a completely tax-free scholarship, then you wouldn't have to file a tax return and you don't need to report any of it. If all or part of your scholarship is taxable and you are required to file a tax return, then you would report the taxable amount when you file your return. You must report this regardless of whether or not you received a Form W-2, which is the proper way to report that work income. However, you would have to go to IRS publication 501 to see if you must file a tax return. Generally, if your income is low enough, for example, if your income is below the standard deduction, then you generally don't need to file a tax return. So in this case, this would be below the standard deduction, and in which case you probably wouldn't be filing a tax return, because if this was your only source of income, basically this would force your Form 1040 to report 0 income, 0 tax liability. So that's all we have for this video. We'll put links to some relevant articles and videos that we've created in the show notes. For example, if you're looking to combine this with any education credits, that might be helpful. And if you cashed in treasury bonds for paying your college costs, we'll put a link to those articles and videos in the show notes. I did want to kind of walk through one last example, and I apologize for doing this, but let's change this number for a second. Let's just imagine that this is, the amount, this is 0. This was a full ride scholarship. You didn't need to use any of it for other education purposes. So you still got the full $20,000. Now, let's imagine that your qualified education expenses was not as much as your scholarship. So you would have to basically be saddled with, the possibility of reporting your excess scholarship as income. Again, subject to your tax filing requirements. So, if you would not normally file an income tax return because your income is considerably lower than the required return threshold, then this probably will keep you under there, assuming you don't have other major sources of income. And this is probably the most likely scenario for most taxpayers, where you're just wondering whether or not you need to pay taxes on the excess. So we'll put links in the show notes to some of the other relevant articles and videos about education credits and excluding your savings bond income for qualified education expenses. If you like our articles, please subscribe to our newsletter. You can go to our website, teachmepersonalfinance.com, type in virtually any tax form that you're looking for, and odds are pretty high that we've written an article about it. If you like our YouTube videos, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you have any questions, comments, or if there's a topic that you'd like to see covered in an upcoming video, please hit me up in the comments section. Thank you very much and have a great day.